Hey everyone, welcome. I am absolutely pumped you're joining me for today's explainer. We are about to completely shatter that old, highly romanticized, no pain, no gain athletic stereotype. See, we've gotten our hands on a trove of highly confidential, data-driven coaching logs from a ridiculously elite track and field program. And honestly, what they reveal is mind-blowing. We're going to unpack a framework today that takes everything you thought you knew about hard work and flips it totally on its head.
So think about this for a second. What if the secret to elite performance isn't actually working harder, but working like an engineer? When we look at a skyscraper or suspension bridge, we expect binary, unadulterated mathematical precision, right? But for some reason, we rarely apply that kind of rigid, architectural blueprint to human performance. We just expect athletes to grit their teeth and grind it out. Well, today, we're going to see exactly why raw effort is actually the enemy of elite velocity.
We've all seen the old-school approach in the movies. You know the montage. A guy in a windbreaker yelling with a stopwatch, athletes literally sweating into puke buckets, the whole thing relying entirely on a coach's mystical gut feeling. But the modern alternative is something called the TiDiSaL system, and it is completely different. It relies on clinical, mathematical precision, X-ray-like diagnostics, and incredibly strict structural loading to actually build elite athletes from the ground up.
Okay, let's dive into exactly how this works. We're going to break down the blueprint of elite performance, check out the central nervous system battery, map out the 3-to-1 wave, talk about the core mantra of execution over ego, meet the AI coaching architect, and finally look at how you can apply this by finding your OTM. Let's get to it.
All right, part 1, the blueprint of elite performance.
Look, unlike steel and concrete, human bodies are incredibly murky. We're dealing with tendons, levers, biochemistry, and let's not forget emotional volatility. It is literally the definition of diagnostic muddy waters. So, how on earth do you engineer something so unpredictable? Well, the answer is TiDiSaL. That stands for timing, direction, speed, and amplitude load. But the real magic here is in its core philosophy, which is to decompose and distill. This system takes the incredibly complex, chaotic variables of human movement, breaks them all the way down to the studs, and distills them into highly specific, data-driven, non-negotiable daily actions. It's all about precision, not punishment.
And the system visualizes this perfection beautifully. Take column More from the program's Myth Codex, which is this wild, alter-universe layer that actually maps real biomechanical truths to symbolic powers. Colin represents the Sentinel arc. It perfectly shows how flawless execution, timing, and defensive stability actually manifest as this almost mythic, stabilized power. The math quite literally translates into magic when the biomechanics are flawless.
Moving right along to part 2, the central nervous system battery.
Now, if you're used to splitting your workouts into leg day, back day, or cardio day, I need you to take that entire framework and throw it right in the trash. The crucial point to understand here is the smartphone analogy. See, most people conflate muscular fatigue with systemic fatigue. But tired muscles, that's just the hardware, like the screen of your phone. You can rest them, and they bounce right back. But your central nervous system, your CNS, that is the actual electrical grid. It's the battery. If you run a heavy, high-processing 3D game, your screen is totally fine, but the battery gets absolutely cooked. If your CNS is fried, your brain literally cannot send the electrical signals fast enough to fire your muscles. You become uncoordinated, and most importantly, you become slow.
Because of that reality, the system has strict, completely non-negotiable volume caps. Get this, 300 meters. That is the surprisingly low cap for true maximum velocity sprinting per session in this program. I mean, if you jog 5Ks, 300 meters sounds like a warm-up. But if you run a 300-meter sprint at true, absolute top speed and a coach looks at you and says, hey, you look fine, run another 200, they are actually destroying your potential. Your electrical battery is depleted, which means you will run that next 200 slightly slower. You are literally practicing being slow. And think about the forces happening at top speed. They are massive. We're talking up to 5 times your body weight on a single leg for just a fraction of a second. Take jumper Narina Kanzada. She's known as the foundation oracle in the Myth Codex. Her avatar is a perfect illustration of the immense ground reaction forces hitting the body. Athletes have to remain perfectly grounded, anchored, and hyper-coordinated to handle it. If your CNS is tired and you try to absorb those forces, you lose that resonance. You start grooving slow, dangerous neural pathways, and that's exactly what we're trying to avoid.
So how do you sustain this over months? That brings us to section 3, the 3-to-1 wave.
Zooming out from the daily schedule, it's obvious you can't just max out every single week if you actually want to peak for a championship without breaking down, physically or emotionally. So the macro architecture strictly follows a mathematical progression. Week 1 is your base, just establishing the rhythm. Week 2 is the build, dialing up the intensity. Week 3 is the peak. This is the heaviest CNS demand of the month, pushing the absolute safe limits. But then comes week 4, the unload. The volume is violently slashed by 40 to 50%. And let me be clear, this is non-negotiable.
And here is exactly why that massive drop is the holy grail of high performance: supercompensation. When you stress the body for 3 weeks straight, you dig a massive hole of fatigue. But when you unload the volume in week 4, the body doesn't just recover back to baseline, it over-repairs. It builds denser muscles and faster neural pathways, specifically anticipating future stress. If you skip that unload week just because you want to work harder, you just keep digging a hole until you physically break or totally burn out.
All right, section 4, and this is a big one: execution over ego.
Elite athletes have massive egos. I mean, you kind of have to, right? That's what gets them up at 5 a.m. to train in the freezing rain. But that exact same ego will destroy their mechanics if it is not strictly managed. This quote from the coach's manual hits the nail on the head. If the bar speed drops, the load is immediately reduced, period. Traditional weightlifting is completely ego-driven. If you squatted 200 pounds last week, you grind out 210 this week. But in a sport of pure power and velocity, it is all about the rate of force development. If a decathlete grinds through a really slow, heavy squat, their ego feels fantastic, but they just trained their central nervous system to fire slowly. So the coach steps in and strips the weight. Execution over ego. Every single time.
We actually see this strict ego management happen intensely during taper weeks, right before a major championship. Take elite vaulters Gavin Holcomb and Jessica Thompson. The absolute golden rule during taper week is do not chase bars. A high jumper is going to feel absolutely amazing on a Thursday before a Saturday meet, and they'll naturally want to jump a massive height in practice just for that dopamine hit, just to prove to themselves they're ready. But doing that spends the exact electrical charge they need for the actual championship. So the system forces them to just walk away.
So who manages all of this? Let's hit section 5, the AI coaching architect. When you're dealing with dozens of athletes, all with hyper-individualized limits, different event types, and complex injury histories, a coach simply cannot rely on human memory. Enter the AI training debrief. After every single practice, the coach speaks into the system, and the AI forces a really strict interview hierarchy. It goes day type, then program, then event group, and finally the athlete. This specific order forces the coach to fully contextualize the objective data before they ever judge the human being. It completely removes emotional bias. Because the data, it doesn't care how tough you are. It only cares about the biomechanical reality of your CNS on that specific day.
And what's really fascinating is how the system hacks the athlete's psychology using specific Latin warm-up modules. Instead of a coach just yelling, "Hey, go jog 2 laps," they use these very clinical terms. Words like primus modus for the first movement, celeritas for quickness, velocitas for neuropriming, and fortius for the weight room. Because these words aren't used in everyday life, they act as powerful Pavlovian psychological triggers. When an athlete hears velocitas, their brain instantly and subconsciously prepares for max effort. It completely outsources the cognitive burden of warming up to the system itself, saving all their brain power for actual technique.
This perfectly brings us to Soraya Bruno, visualized beautifully as the harmonic conductor. She represents the system's ultimate AI feedback loop in action. It's its incredible ability to take immense physical strain and convert it into refined harmonic signals under extreme pressure. Just like the AI debrief flags fatigue and immediately adjusts tomorrow's practice plan, Soraya embodies the idea of transmitting micro-corrections to keep the entire team's frequency perfectly stabilized.
Which brings us to our final takeaway today. Section 6, Finding Your Ausium.
Now, you might be wondering how this applies to you. Well, this architecture directly applies to your daily output too. Whether you're a corporate manager, a creative, or really just trying to optimize your own life, biology applies to cognitive and emotional work just as much as physical work. The TiDiSaL system mandates what they call an autium state for athletes on their rest days. It's a classical Latin concept representing a total physiological and psychological reset. You really have to understand this. Rest isn't just the absence of work. If you're physically resting on the couch but agonizing over a bad meeting or stressing about emails, you are still actively draining the battery. Autium is an intentional, purposeful shift into the parasympathetic nervous system. It is the essential low power mode for your body's smartphone.
So we return right back to that core mantra, execution over ego performance. Ask yourself, are you trying to run a max velocity, high CNS day 5 days a week at the office? Are you grinding through late night work at 11 p.m. just to prove to yourself how dedicated and tough you are?
Because if you are, all you're doing is grooving slow, error-prone neural pathways. You absolutely have to respect your own biological output data. Strip the bar if you have to. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on today. Are you intentionally scheduling your low power mode, or are you just waiting around for a catastrophic biological shutdown? Remember, without the unload, you never supercompensate. You just break. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible blueprint today. Take that rest day, drop the ego, and I will see you on the next explainer.